Come on in, folks, if you'd like to watch some blacksmithing. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the J.L. Porter Blacksmith Shop, and my name is Kipp Coddington. I'm up here from Arlington, Virginia, and I have the pleasure of being here really because of a couple individuals. One is Bob Rupert, who is the president of the Southside Historical Village Association, and Bob is a master blacksmith. But we're here at the 67th annual Hookstown Fair in Hookstown, Pennsylvania, and we're on the site of the J.L. Porter Blacksmith Shop. And I'm going to be demonstrating a couple projects today. I think I'm going to start with a decorative flower, and here's an example of one I previously made. You'll see it consists of a leaf and a stem, and then the head of the flower itself. And believe it or not, this is made out of a straight piece of metal, a bar stock, and it will take about an hour. But the starting material is this dimensional, just flat bar, plain steel, which I guess is probably about 1/8 of an inch thick and 1 inch wide. And I'm going to start by making the leaf at one end and then come down and taper it in to make a stem, and then make the individual petals along the way. If I overheat the metal, it will burn, it won't melt. And that took me a long time to figure that out, and I ruined a lot of pieces along the way. But you would think that I could just sit here and heat this piece, get it hotter and hotter, and the hotter it gets, the easier it would be to form. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The metal will actually burn before it melts, and when the metal burns, it can't be resurrected. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a leaf on the tip of this thin bar stock. So I've got to taper it down. And Bob Rupert has made a wonderful shop here. So he's got that mirror above me, so I think if you look in the mirror, you should be able to look down on the top of the anvil and see what I'm doing. And I can work the metal as long as it's glowing. But as soon as it goes dark, as it is here, I've got to stop. So even though this metal is still very, very hot, you could touch that and get a really bad burn. It's probably 1,000 degrees. But I've got to stop working it, because if I continue to hit it when it's dark, I can induce fractures in it or ruin the piece, or induce a fracture that will fail later. But you can see how I've started the tip, what will be the tip of the leaf. Now I'll reheat that back up. You can also use gas. You can use propane, for example, can be used as a fuel for blacksmithing. If I was using a propane-powered forge, it would look a little more like a kiln as opposed to this coal forge. It looks more like a fireplace or chimney. All right, so that tip is almost done. Again, the metal's getting dark, so I just stop here. All right, so the tip is done. So again, this will be the tip of what will be the leaf for the new flower. But now I've got to come down and segregate or neck off where the stem will begin, and then I'll finish off the rest of the leaf and then move on to the flower itself. Okay, so I'm going to come over the horn of the anvil. This is called the horn, and neck down where I want the stem to begin. So there you can see the beginning of the stem. And that's why some of the early blacksmiths, they were considered to be magicians. They performed weddings. They were really the top of the food chain in terms of early society. So here again, I'm just finishing off this stem. So there's a great story that demonstrates the importance of the blacksmith over time amongst all the trades, and I'm sure it's got to be a true story because it's a story about blacksmithing. But all right, so I've got this stem area made. Now if I was really going to tighten this up, what I would do, you see how I've got the metal is just folded over to make the stem. And in theory, what I should be doing here to make this seamless is I would be doing a forge weld. So if you look here, you probably can't see, but there's just a thin little seam where that metal has folded up on itself. So ultimately that will be, it doesn't look 100% professional. You could get water in there, but for purposes of this demonstration, I think that's good enough. You can do actually what's known as forge welding. Just like in the modern day, you'd use a MIG welder or some other type of welding technology to weld two pieces of metal together. A blacksmith can do the same thing. It's called forge welding. And it doesn't always work, but you just heat up the metal until it gets white hot. You've probably all heard the phrase white hot. Then you add some flux, which the flux, of course, is a material that keeps the joints clean. And the traditional flux will be borax, if you can believe it, laundry detergent. Put borax on it and then tap it down and create a forge weld. It's not entirely safe with an audience around because you get some splatter, which is one reason why I'm not going to do it. Another reason is that I'm not always successful at it, so will spare me some embarrassment if I don't attempt it. But in any event, you can do forge welding with blacksmithing as well. All right, so I've got this leaf heated up. So again, I'm going to use the cross peen, and I'm going to drag this metal towards me. So I'm going to come down one side. All right, so I've just quickly shaped the top half of the leaf. So see how the top half is thinned out and pulled down. So that's one half of the leaf side, the top side of the leaf done. Now I'll do the bottom. Well, I actually do a lot of my blacksmithing in a town called Herndon, Virginia. And it's just about an hour due west of Washington, D.C. And it's at a park called Frying Pan Park, and the forge there is called the Moffett Forge. So here I'm using the straight peen again. All right, so I could spend more time on that, but I think that's going to be good enough for government work. You can see how that's flattened out into a basic leaf shape. But it has a couple problems. Number one, it's flat, so it looks like it was run over by a truck, and it doesn't have any veins in it. So if you looked at that, it looks like a spoon that got crushed on the highway. So I'm going to quickly put some veins on it, and then I'll shape it to try to make it look realistic. Let me just do a little more care on this leaf, make it look a little more. All right. All right, I think that leaf is good enough. Now I'm going to quickly do some veins. veins in the leaf. And to do the veins, I'm going to use a chisel. And actually, this isn't just any old chisel. This is a chisel that was handmade by Bob Rupert. Bob has kindly made a lot of my critical tools. So this is a chisel, and it's been hardened and tempered at the tip, so it resists heat when you use it against hot metal. All right, so chiseling in the veins are just really easy. So I've got the flatten out the leaf and then just do a hot chisel. Just put in the center vein. All right, so I've got the center vein in, and I'm going to dip the tip of the chisel in water to keep its heat hardened characteristics. You can see again, just a simple little line for the center vein of the leaf, and now I'll do the side branches, and then the leaf will almost be done. So I was telling you about the Moffett Forge, which is normally where I do a lot of my work down in Herndon, Virginia. And the Moffett Forge is interesting just because it was an interesting area in terms of geography during the Civil War, because Northern Virginia was really never controlled by the North or the South, and the blacksmiths really played a critical role, actually all throughout the Civil War, but certainly in that part of the country in particular. So I always sort of think, what was the, is it the Clint Eastwood movie, The Outlaw Josie Wales? What's the one where it's in the Civil War, and there's the gentleman who's running the ferry between the northern state and the southern, I forget what it is, and he whistles a northern tune if he's transporting northerners, and he whistles a southern tune if he's transporting southerners. I think it's The Outlaw Josie Wales, but I always sort of think it must have been the same way with blacksmith shops in the Civil War, that you're just trying to earn a living, and a cavalry unit rides by, and what are you going to do? It's like, hey, I'm for you, whatever side you're on. But yeah, so I got a little bit of overheating there, but that'll. So now I'm going to work on the veins. And I got the side veins on the one, but so the blacksmith shops, there was a very famous Southern raider called Colonel Mosby, who was really the original guerrilla raider during the Civil War, and he patrolled all over northern Virginia. Actually, they called that part of Virginia the Mosby Confederacy, because he really controlled it. But his boss was Jeb Stuart, and you probably all heard of Jeb Stuart. So I'm going to use this stump to finish off the leaf, and this isn't just any stump. This is a stump that's got a divot in it, or a scoop out of the top. All right, and I'm going to hammer this down into the. All right, so there is a more realistic looking leaf. So you can get the natural folds and contours by hammering the leaf veins down against a piece of wood. The wood will cushion the blows, but the wood will give these natural indentations and general curves you can't get by if I was trying to do this on an edge of the anvil. All right, so now I've got to work on the petals. So I've got the leaf made, I've got the stem, and again, for some of you that just came in, this is what I'm trying to duplicate, is make another one of these flowers. So I've got the leaf made, I've got the stem, so now I've got to do those petals. And to do the petals, I'm going to do little McDonald-like arches along the top of the bar, and then using the straight peen again, feather those out, and then cut the bar off and curl it up into the head of the flower. So I'm going to use this hardy cutoff tool. Again, it's always safety first with blacksmithing. You've got to be very cognizant about safety. And so obviously you don't want to touch something that's hot. You also have to be very cognizant of the hardy cutoff tool, because I could be sitting here hammering and inadvertently drive my knuckles down on that chisel, and that would be a bad day. So You have to be very, very cognizant of safety when you're doing blacksmithing. So I'm going to do this notch. All right, so this is the, come on in, welcome. You can take a seat if you'd like. So what I've done, I just made the first little notch. So this will be the innermost petal of the flower. But if you look at that, does that look like a petal? No. I mean, it looks like a malformed mushroom or something. So I've got to taper this out because, again, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to make petals that look like this. All right, so I've got the color I want. Now I'm going to use the straight peen. Come down on that tab. And again, that peen is just pulling that metal towards me, preferentially in one direction. And there's your first petal. But for much of history, people did not know how to get carbon into iron. So they would use just really basically pure iron. So you've probably all heard of something called wrought iron. I mean, I remember my mom used to refer to wrought iron, and I never really understood what that was, but wrought iron, actually, I guess you really can't, as of about 1970, it's very difficult to get, but wrought iron is iron that is pure iron that's been hammered out through a foundry process. But so here I've got a couple more notches made, but let me just do a little segue here on steel. All right, so I'm going to make a few more petals here, and then I'm going to finish off this flower. Again, I'm using the straight peen. Again, trying to save energy, so while this bar is still glowing hot, going to make a few more notches. Because every implement and tool in a shop that's organized by Bob Rupert is always flawless and perfect. So this Hardy cutoff tool has a wonderful sharp and clean edge on it. All right, so it's cooling off, so I'm going to stop hitting it. But now I've made a few more. You can see I've got a few more of these notches made. That will be more petals, so I'll quickly form those out into petals. Okay, so this is roughly, put this in the vise. Then I'm going to try to bend this over. So again, I'm just trying to get these petals, these rudimentary petals, in a plane that's perpendicular to the stem. This metal is when it's hot, it's so thin and it's very soft. So it really just wants to bend. But I'm going to have to do this over a couple heats. But this is a mechanical bellows, and really the air delivery system in a blacksmith shop is probably the technology that has most changed over time. I mean, in the old days, again, you had the leather bellows in a shop like this, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s shop. You'd have the mechanical bellows. You'd still see this in shops today, but if you went to a school like the Touchstone Center for Crafts, which again I recommend, you would have different types of air delivery systems. In theory, you might go into a modern school or a modern shop and they'll have compressed air, and you're just turning a switch to get that air into the fire, under the fire. Okay, so I've got this bent over. It's not bent over as much as I would like, but just for the sake of time now, I'm going to start wrapping this around to create the head of the flower. Okay, about ready to commence the wrap. And as I'm wrapping this around, I'm going to tap the ends of those petals over so that it looks a little more lifelike. All right, so this is beginning to morph from a guardrail into a flower shape. So you can see just by turning that around, it looks, you wrap it up just like a cinnamon. All the exposed iron coated with linseed oil, and they would not allow any rust whatsoever. If you saw rust on a Civil War, wagon or whatever, you had to, it was taken out of service and you had to file it off and recoat it. And okay, so I'm just using the ball peen hammer from Bob Rupert that I've pilfered to knock over these petals. Almost done here. Let me do one more heat. All right, so this is getting there. It's almost done. All right, so this is almost done. Use the pilfered hammer here again, so I'm gonna just knock over these petals, the edges of these petals. And I'm gonna just whack this section in. There is something satisfying about blacksmithing because at some level you can fix anything just by wailing away on it. It isn't quite true, but it's sometimes it feels like that. It's a stress reliever. All right, so I'm going to declare victory, at least on the flower head. Then all I've got to do is bend over the stem. So again, this is, I won't walk all the way around. You can see it just all wrapped up. So it's just, again, just the optical illusion of a flower. So then I'll just bend over the stem. This is a very nice forge. If you see how well it drafts, you would come into many blacksmith shops and it would be quite smoky inside, but the Southside Historical Village Association under Bob Rupert's leadership has just done a fantastic job with this facility. Even a simple thing like building a chimney, I mean, you would think that would be, you would think anybody could sort of build a chimney like that. Well, it turns out there's a lot of engineering that goes into the design of a ventilation system. But in those old blacksmith shops, so before you had ventilation, I'm sure those poor souls did not live all that long, just with breathing in smoke and all that. I think even just the ventilation part of shops is really quite excellent as well. All right, so just gonna twist this around. There we go. Now that it's done, I can, so that's the flower is basically done. I could spend a lot more time twisting it around, but I think I will declare victory. And so then to cool it off, you just, every blacksmith shop has a bucket of water called a Quench Bucket. So this is if you're done with your piece and you got to cool it off, or heaven forbid something catches fire and that's your flower. So, and again, this would just be, but if I was really going to do this right, if I was going to do a traditional coating on it, you typically apply the coating when it's hot or warm. But that's so there's your flower. So does anybody have any questions? All right, well, thank you all very much. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you. Absolutely.